In this game, impacts aren't just expected, they're celebrated. That's why premier players choose Q-Collar, the proven shield for their brains. Be ready for the clash. Keep your head protected and in the game.
All right, here we go. Moving on to attack. This is probably where we'll spend the most time. It's probably where coaches spend the most time.
It's definitely where they spend the most money.
Definitely where they spend the most money. If you had the bag to go spend, who do you go get in the attack position?
I'll start with one, Hanson Peck. I just love the slick attackman, and I think he's got this slickness and toughness that is going to be very translatable at the next level. He's another guy that the NLF Club Championship, I think, revealed how good he is in the biggest moments, and I just love everything about his game.
He's a player who, Dan, I sent you a message during NHSLS that I felt like it was the first time I'd seen him play well and maybe even hard all summer. And he scored 3 goals in the span of 5 minutes, and sometimes you don't need to look that much farther than that. For me, I think it starts with Lucas Garcia. Again, a player who's been on our radar for more than a year. Brunswick, pedigree, prime time. His all-around game, his ability to dodge to feed, dodge to score, facilitate, make good decisions, it's what I gravitate toward. He has the athletic tools to get to a certain floor, but then his game flourishes because of his cerebral approach. Kind of equivalently, but way more shading toward the athletic end of the spectrum is Noah Hahn, Georgetown Prep, and Next Level. I know that this is hyperbole and it's going to sound crazy. The only player that I can compare Noah Hahn's quickness to is Michael Powell. The first step and the speed with which the ball comes out of his stick is outrageous. The problem with both of those guys is that I don't think either of them had very productive summers. I think if you're a coach that's going to invest in them, you kind of have to do so expecting that you're going to get more out of them than what you've seen so far.
Terry, can I do the flip side of that? And that's, AJ Lazaro is a guy that just every time I see him, it's productivity. He's just throwing in 3 or 4 assists and getting to the goal. And I don't think that there's one physical attribute that you really oh my gosh, he is the best at it. He is the fastest. He is the biggest. He is the strongest. None of that comes out. But he just flat out produces, whether it's, calling his own number, kind of a great mid-range guy, really good at taking that extra step to get into a good shooting lane and firing at home, or just his backside feeds are always right on point. He's just one of those guys that's always you're going to quietly look at the stat sheet and be like, oh, he had 5 points. I didn't realize it.
Some of the attack when we've mentioned that they've got the athleticism and quarterbacking skills. A guy who really stood out to me this summer, taking over a game-wise, is Jay Specks, FCA attackman. Who's
so excited to end this conversation.
I'm excited too, because he is a guy that has all the attributes that can translate to the next level, because he didn't force it and wasn't jamming it into double teams. Now, this is, I think, why this conversation is so valuable, because this was a one-game sample size for me in terms of taking over a game and completely flipping my opinion over a couple weeks ago, where I saw him, and it was still great, but his performance was just super fun to watch in terms of his wing dodging, his ability to dodge down the alleys, take defenders behind, manipulate some slides like we talked with Dylan, and a guy who I'll get to, but I want you to.
Well, no, the element of it that is so interesting is that you changed your mind insofar as you thought the player was at this level, and then you came away with the opinion of him being at this level. Where do you think the reality is, or which end of the spectrum do you think is it closer to? Because if he can sustain the performance that is that ceiling that you saw, I mean, he might be the best attackman in the class.
Totally. I think it's somewhere in between for sure. And it's hard to maintain being the focal point of the offense the entire game or the entire summer. And his attributes of one-on-one dodging and reading the defense, I think, just really stuck out. But just his shot, too. It's such a snappy release that never stopped moving, on the run shot, and just was absolutely pinging corners and painting the pipe on every shot. So his accuracy is there when he's on, and he's just a guy that can take over a game. A guy who is kind of the opposite in terms of he doesn't really take over a game, but you can tell he has the physical attributes and the ability to get to his own spots and create mismatches and get off really powerful shots with both hands. Is the guy Cole Carberry from Team 10. Strong right-hander, going to play within the flow of the offense. It seems like he's really well coached in that manner, and his ability to roll back to his left, question mark dodge, and get topside with his right. He's super fun.
Yeah, Cole is a big body, right, like you described, but he also uses it. I think a lot of times you get those big bodies and they're just kind of like, maybe they hide their stick or they go into a post-up, but I think he's strong within it and kind of uses that as well. Once he gets a defender on his back, they're stuck there. He does a really good job, and in basketball they call it the hostage dribble. I think in lacrosse you call it closing your dodge, right? But he does a really good job of getting defenders hostage where they're just like stuck on his back and can't do anything from there because he's so long and wide, and does a good job of using that frame. And again, I think you mentioned like his success within the flow of the offense. I think he's a guy that if he catches it on a short dodge on the backside, like really good things are going to happen. And so again, it's, how do these coaches evaluate the guy, see them within a role within their offense, and then decide like, okay, that's a guy that we want to go get and deploy him in that manner. And I think for Cole, like I think a lot of coaches are going to see, somebody that could be really effective on the backside in a short dodge situation that is also, has good hands, finishes inside, and is clean with time and room.
I came away from my watching Team 10 really impressed by Carberry, but roughly equivalently impressed by Tyler Rockowitz, who is a guy I know there's a little bit more kind of like a polarizing vibe around. And then even within that, like I think there are some folks who think Brad Barber is the best attackman for Team 10. Yeah. So I'm interested in your opinion on that, like basically the hierarchy there. And then equivalently, and even though it's a completely different team, but a similar dynamic with Massachusetts where there are four guys. We've got Tuck Gilbane and Teddy Fasoli on the board, but also Liam Daly and Ty Curry who fit into the mix. So can you just talk about both of those teams and how their attackmen kind of like measure up and compare?
I think on Team 10, like the Rockowitz, Barber, Cole line, like they all are very different players. Barber and Rockowitz both have lefties, so like that puts them on the same side of the field. But Barber is so much stronger, right? He's got a much more like solid base to him. I think he has a little bit more range to his game. I think if you were to see him dodge, you would look at him and you'd say like, okay, that guy is a bit more explosive, has a bit more power to his game. Whereas Rockowitz is a little bit more savvy, a little bit more slick, probably is better closer to the goal. Whereas Barber's going to be equally effective, like farther away and getting downhill and, have some range to his game. And so I think that's kind of I guess if I had to give a hierarchy and like put him on a depth chart, I think I like Cole Carberry the best of the group. Then I'd go Barber, then I'd go Rockowitz. And I think if you asked 3 more people to 5 more people, you might get a different order from each of the crew. That's just from my sample size, what I've seen. And I tend to lean back on like a level of polish and consistency that I think Carberry brings to the table. Heading north, we'll go to those Massachusetts crew, that 4 guys. Gilbane starts it, right? Like I think when we come to this stuff, like I guess we're unveiling plenty here. Like he'll be a top 10 kid. I really love his game. I think he's extremely cerebral with a combination of like a quarterback ability. But if you ask him to just like be on the backside and finish, and like he can do a lot of different stuff, I think his ceiling, like as he gets older, wherever he ends up, I think we'll see him in like kind of a quarterback at X type of role. And that's how Massachusetts uses him. They do a really good job, I'd say, like of all of the club teams, of instilling some structure, but not overdoing it. And they do it on their own down on that attack group. Like they're very quick to get into some end line quick hitters and that type of stuff. And whenever they get into those types of sets, I think Gilbane's stock continues to rise. Daly, lefty shooter, lefty finisher, is really strong on that wing. I think Ty Curry is very similar to what I said about Gilbane. Really good at X, great with the ball on his stick, There's no shot clock in club lacrosse most of the time. But if there were, and there were a short shot clock, and he went and picked the ball up on the end line at X, I'd be pretty confident that they're going to come up with something good out of it.
That was the structure part that resonated with me, is that when Gilbane was out of the game, Frisoli could pick up a lot of what those responsibilities were pretty seamlessly.
Yep, yeah, and Frisoli I would put in the same boat. And then Frisoli, what he does that those guys don't do is I could very easily see Frisoli coming in out of the box and attacking downhill with speed. He's got great quickness to his game, great overall general speed. So once he does get that first step, he's able to keep it. And then he's two-handed and, again, cerebral, understands team defense. So once teams get sliding, like, he does a good job of deciphering it all. And so I like all four of those guys. I don't know that I could give you a hierarchy of the three besides Gilbane. I guess it would go Gilbane, Frisoli, Daly, Curry. But if you argued to me that you like Curry over Daly because of what he can do with the ball in his stick, I'd have no problems with it.
What about guys who put the ball in the net and, Charlie Cacciabato does it better than anyone in this class?
Yeah, better than any American.
Any American in this class. I'll concede to our neighbors up north. But, I mean, just hands, can score from any angle. It just sometimes maybe we underestimate, like, that this game is about putting the ball in the net and scoring more goals than the opponent, and he does that in spades.
If I had to give a golden award for all hands, right? Like, the MLB has Golden Glove. If we were to give Golden Hand Award for the summer, he's my number one pick for it. He's such soft hands inside, right-handed, and left-handed.
Or just Americanized?
I think that the next finisher that we're referring to would probably be Cooper Brozic. But yeah, Cacciabato, his two-handed, what you would sacrifice a little bit of in terms of just like overall finishing ability, he makes up for with this like relentless movement. And he's always kind of finding this gap and seam behind defenses that you can't coach. And then beyond that, he's so two-handed that regardless of like where you're supposed to be on the field, the stick is always in that like proper cutting space. So he's never has those like awkward across his body finishes or anything like that. But he has a flair of creativity that I haven't seen from a finisher. I mean, I haven't been doing this for super long, so ever.
No, I'm glad you mentioned Brozic though. Like his ability to catch anything inside and finish it was put in spots that the goalies will never get to. He stands out any day of the week.
And then Brozic is a much better dodger. Brozic would be a much better like option either in a short shot clock situation, balls on the end line. One of those two has to go pick the ball up. I'm picking Brozic.
Totally.
I talked to a quarterfinal head coach, and Cooper Brozic is the number one player on their board. Equivalently, talked to a first-round head coach, and Carson Winters is the number one player on their board, which I was surprised by. But he plays with a ton of speed and plays with his head up and just kind of knows how to play. I've been impressed, but when I heard that it made me take a second look. A couple other guys I want to get your thoughts on. John Balsamo is somebody that you and I have been talking about all summer. Younger brother of Charles Balsamo, who transferred from Duke to Virginia in the offseason. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times in lacrosse we go to that like quarterback comparison, but I think for Balsamo the better comparison is a basketball point guard. And I think for two reasons. One, like he spends a lot of his time up above the goal, and so I think that translates a little bit better in terms of like the cross-sport comparison, where he's like above the goal and on the wings and like kind of sees the field from the top down rather than from back up. And I think that gives him a little bit of a unique element to his game. But in general, he's just a really, really high points to turnover kid, right? Like the ball goes into a stick and it either is a safe decision or it's a point. It's very, very ever a turnover in the opposite direction. And if it is, it's because of like, he took a calculated risk and there was someone open inside and it didn't quite work out. But like it's the type of risk that at the end of the day you're probably okay making because you have to have a few or you're probably playing way too conservative, right? And so I think he's one that I would put into that like just like super poised, super composed, cerebral, and kind of brings this like basketball point guard presence to the lacrosse field.
I want to get your thought on Harrison Morris.
What comes to mind is attack mode. Like he's a guy that's always like he's going 110%. He's going 1,000 miles per hour. He is going hard all the time. So much quickness, really ability to kind of take over matchups. And when you talk about productivity, he's a guy that National All-Star game. I think I saw him score 4 goals in one game. I think I saw him score 5 goals another game. And like he does it almost with reckless abandon. I would say he's like one of those guys that. You look at him and you're like, are you in control of what you're doing? But he proves it every time he goes out in the field and does it. So I love him, and really curious to see where he goes, because he's going to be a really exciting player, not just to have on your roster if you're a college coach, but if you're a fan, he's a guy that you're just going to love to watch.
So I'm going to pick up on the kind of relentlessness/recklessness point and talk about Brady Mollett, who some of the guys that I've spoken to have suggested he might be the best quarterback in this class. And I think that, when you look at that through the lens of a combination of, the expectation that Spalding is on this ascendance, and he's probably, pretty responsible for that, alongside guys like Robbie Hopper and some of their more established players that are a little bit older than him. But also in terms of, I think they're building in some improvement on the basis of a combination of his approach and his athletic development, his physical development that looks like it's kind of forthcoming. But when I watch him play, I mean, one of the terms I used in the evaluation that I wrote about him was dive bomb, and his willingness. I was referring to a play in transition, but I've also seen it in settled sets, and we've talked about this a lot, right? There will always be a little bit of an over reliance or a little bit of a greater reward for significant production in the most high leverage games, and he had it at NLF, and that made a strong impression. To kind of finish up, one guy that we haven't talked about that I know we probably need to hit is Timmy Plunkett.
Timmy is again another like really versatile kid that I'd say is can fill a lot of different jobs or checks a lot of different marks for coaches as they're going and trying to find their guy at attack. Shoots it well, he can dodge it and get up and sweep it. He's pretty two-handed. There's not very many spots on this field that I wouldn't be comfortable with him, with the ball in his stick. And then beyond that, I think he does a good job off of it. I think he's pretty polished with his footwork. Good job in the two-man stuff. And so, yeah, I think he's just, again, a guy that maybe isn't the most elite at any one thing in comparison to all of these guys on our board, but does a excellent job at a lot of things and checks a lot of boxes, and it is really just an awesome goal scorer.
Yeah, to me, just deception is the name of the game for Timmy Plunkett. Coming out of Iona Prep and playing for Express North throughout the summer, I saw him a few times. Just all of a sudden, it seems like he dodges through 3 guys and just simple face dodges, leaners. He had everything working for him, and like you said, maybe not the most explosive athletic attackman on the big board, but guy compared to you, TJ Malone. He's just a guy that can find the back of the net in so many different ways. Plunkett is just super fun to watch for sure.
Championships aren't won on the final shot alone. It all starts with the commitment to stay healthy and on the field for your team. Q-Collar, essential brain protection so athletes can chase greatness.